During the years, during my time and for years since, and I've continued to follow the North Korea situation because we continue, all the agencies I mentioned, we continue to be very active in North Korea, albeit at a smaller level than we used to be. But during all that period, the extent of the engagement tended to be fairly low level, tended to be key envoys who would come to try to free someone who'd been arrested for whatever reason in the country and was a hostage in prison or whatever they would call it, and the government people would come from these various countries and try to take these people home. I mean, that was the extent of anything in terms of a dialogue, in terms of that type of interaction. We used to go down, Pyongyang is about 100 miles or so north of the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. Panmunjom is the truce village. And you've seen now the pictures the last few days where Kim Jong-un walked over the line. It's literally a line in the middle of this little park. And there are these buildings where they have all the various truce discussions. And he grabbed the South Korean president. You may remember he pulled him over and then went back again, right? It's very symbolic. It's extraordinary. I've been there many times on the north side. I've never been on the south side. And there are many monuments to the war. There are the rooms you can sit in, where they had all the discussions for the truce. But there was never a peace treaty. The war technically never ended. I'm referring to the Korean War. Never ended. It's only been a truce, and it's called the Truce Village. So, if nothing else, if there could simply be a peace treaty and a formal end to the war, I know it sounds crazy in 2018, but since 1953, whenever the truce was, there's been nothing. And that would be, I think, psychologically, really, really useful to have something that symbolic, but people would really notice that on both sides, that there was finally an end to the war. And remember, that was a UN action. It wasn't, people think it was General MacArthur in the US and all that. Well, actually, it was a whole group of countries that were involved as a UN action. And so when you go there, those troops are actually there, on the south side, are actually there with UN helmets and UN flags and that. So the UN has an interest in this too. So, psychologically, I think it would set a nice tone for future discussions, if indeed those are now coming. I've always believed, and I continue to believe in the most difficult places where I've ever served, that dialogue is critical. Just openness, willingness to talk, willingness to see another perspective, raising up the shackles and circling the wagons. Again, you're speaking to a long-term UN official, but to me that doesn't work. To me, that just adds fuel to the fire. You've got to have dialogue. Difficult that can be. Hold your nose if necessary. Just go in the room, sit down, try to connect. I've always believed that there's always some common ground that you can find, even with the most intangible, tractable, whatever the words are, situation where you think this is hopeless. It's not. And I think from what you just explained, what is now happening, it's very, very positive. And I don't want to say I'm surprised, but it's like, wow, really? Are we really, really going to have the sitting president of the US and the sitting head, the premier of North Korea, meet? Really? That's never happened, ever, since North Korea was set up, since the demarcation and the split of the two Koreas. It's extraordinary stuff. We're not there yet, but to me, just the fact that we're even having this discussion now is hugely optimistic. I mean, I don't want to be naive about it. Let's see where it goes. But just the fact that we've got these countries talking, South Korea's role, the Japanese role. History in that area weighs very heavy, very, very heavy. Korea was a Japanese colony for many, many, many years before World War II. There are sensitivities that go way back. And I often had it told to me, he said, you're from North America, Mr. Coutts, you know. It's like treating me like a babe in woods, you know, and I had gray hair then too. But, you know, like, you know, you're from a country that's not, you know, 200 years old. For them, that's a drop in the bucket. For Korea, China, Japan, you know, and all these dynamics. So they often are, well, young upstart, who are you to be telling us? So you got to get past that stuff, and we seem to be doing that finally now. I don't know. He appears to be his own person. He appears to be, you know, trying to make his mark. You have to understand that, as I explained before, being an isolated country, given that the vast majority of people never even meet a foreigner, never even see a foreigner, and given the way that the system has evolved, the role of the great leader, the dear leader, and now the grandson, it's hard to explain how exalted they are. I mean, you travel the countryside and there will be like poster boards, billboards painted, permanent, concrete, different scenes, art scenes of the great leader or even the dear leader in the various poses with children, or, you know, giving a speech, or, you know, just talking, or just everywhere, everywhere. Every public building and home, so when you go into someone's living room, everywhere, there are two pictures. One of the dear leader and one of the great leader, always. You know that everyone wears a pin, the same thing, everyone. You know, it's a whole, you know, they're very focused on their leadership, and also expect a lot from them. It's all they know. It's the only system which they know. So now we have the grandson of the founder, and you may know, was educated abroad. So he's got a, you know, broader perspective as a result, I would expect. But yeah, I mean, again, leadership in any country, I don't care where you are, bold steps that are outside the realm of what people think possible can really shift the whole dynamic. And again, the best example would be President Nixon and Mao Zedong. I mean, the opening of China. President Nixon, and I was following all this, I was your age at that time, he was the last one that anyone would have expected, you know, seemed to be extremely anti-communist and all the rest of it. He was the one who flew to Beijing and was toasting Mao Zedong in the Great Hall. But see, that's what it took. Probably no one else could have done that on the American political scene at the time, other than him, and get away with it, because he was seen to be so extreme against all this. But then he, again, for whatever reasons, you know, there's books written about this, but he saw, no, you know, we need a shift. And perhaps that's what's happening now with these two leaders. They realize that the way not they personally, but the way these systems have engaged with each other for years now, since the Korean War, hasn't worked. And maybe it's time to try a new approach. And for sure, this is new, capital N, and unprecedented. Again, two sitting heads of state from these two situations, from these two countries. Wow. So, that's it.